Thanks to the New Orleans Saints' patience, a signing for Justin Simmons on a visit feels all the more possible. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints for the soon-to-debut LouisianaSports.net, also Saints analyst over at WWL TV. We appreciate you very much for being here with us on today's episode. We're taking a look at where things stand for the New Orleans Saints after another practice day, day 12. We'll take a look at Jake Haener, who returned and looked really, really good. We'll take a look at the standout two wide receivers as wide receiver 3 looks to be getting clearer and clearer and clearer for New Orleans. We'll lead everything off, of course, with the biggest story, Justin Simmons here in Irvine for the visit with the New Orleans Saints, set to arrive this afternoon after the New Orleans Saints finished up practice earlier today. Have some updates on why this feels like it could actually happen, that the New Orleans Saints could sign Justin Simmons. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The New Orleans Saints are going to have Justin Simmons in for a visit today. That visit is either actively ongoing or about to start. We were told that he would arrive in the afternoon after the New Orleans Saints wrapped up practice. So we should be in the area of the visit as I'm recording this, as you're watching this, for those of you that are here for the live show. Here's why I think that this signing can actually end up happening. Earlier on in the offseason, the number that was reported as the asking price for Justin Simmons and his camp was $18 million a year, or somewhere in that neighborhood. The New Orleans Saints are not going to sign Justin Simmons for $18 million in a year. They're very unlikely, based on what they have done all offseason long so far, to even sign him to a deal that is a multi-year deal. What you're looking at here is very likely a New Orleans Saints team that's trying to get a one-year deal done with Justin Simmons for somewhere less than $10 million, something that you can maybe add some incentives to, and then let Justin Simmons hit the market next year and go out there and pursue his big money. In return, the New Orleans Saints get a third-round compensatory pick the year later. This is the best-case scenario for both sides. And here's what makes it possible for the New Orleans Saints to get this done. They were not desperate, and they are not desperate to address their safety position. If the New Orleans Saints walk into week 1 of this season with Tyrann Mathieu at one safety spot, and then either Jonathan Abram or second-year safety Jordan Howden at the other safety spot, they are perfectly happy. The New Orleans Saints, Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, defensive coordinator, defensive backs coach Marcus Robertson, they love Jonathan Abram. They do love Justin Simmons, but they also love Jordan Howden. This situation is not about the New Orleans Saints going after Justin Simmons because they need someone to save them at the position. What that means is that Justin Simmons is the one that's in the greater area of desperation. He needs to play in 2024 if he wants to get a bigger contract in 2025. He's looking for a gig. The New Orleans Saints have one that they can offer him, and the role that they would be able to put him in should be right up his alley in terms of what it is that he wants to get done. I want to draw your attention to something that Dennis Allen said to us today as we were asking him about Justin Simmons after practice. One of the things that he said was that they actually had contact earlier on. He said in the spring. He wasn't able to specifically dial down to when in the spring it was. He believes, though, that it might have been even after the draft that they had some connection. He said it was definitely after kind of that early first wave of free agency. It seemed like the thing that kept them far apart from one another was the financials. Then he said something along the lines of, "We're closer now." Meaning, I take that to mean, putting 2 and 2 together, that if what kept them far apart earlier was the money, And what brings them closer now, it's likely the money, right? And the only way that you get closer with the money is if Justin Simmons came down on his asking price. And if he's willing to come down on his asking price for the right landing spot, which very well could be New Orleans. I'll lay out my argument for that here in just a moment. But what probably didn't happen is that the New Orleans Saints, very, very unlikely that they would say, you know what, we'll pay more now. Why? For what purpose? There's no reason to. You've got Jordan Howden, you've got Jonathan Abram, you've got Tyrann Mathieu, you've got Will Harris, you've got Ugo Amadi, you've got JT Gray, you've got guys that you really like as the New Orleans Saints. So it's unlikely that things ticked up. And here we go. We just got the news here. Justin Simmons has arrived. So the visit is now beginning. So this isn't a visit that has taken all day or anything like that. I'm being told that he has arrived. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I should have said that out loud. Who knows? I said it, so it doesn't matter. But so either he's been here already or he's just having shown up. But in any case, this is still early in the visit at the time that I'm recording this. So this isn't a situation where he's been around all day and there's been no movement. Okay. So I want to make sure that I mention that. So we'll see. Either he's here, has been here for a little bit, or he just arrived. I don't know. One of those two. Anyway, back to the main point. The main point being that it's very unlikely that the New Orleans Saints budged on their number because they're not desperate. They don't need to budge on their number at all. They're at a situation to where they're comfortable with what they've got. So if they got closer in terms of what's being asked for, it's very likely that that's Justin Simmons and his camp's number that has moved. Much like Reed here, my very good friend who I actually went to high school with, I love this guy, says in the chat, kind of my thought. Why chase someone that wants that kind of cash if you're set at the position with players that you know and trust? Exactly. So they're at a situation now to where they can say, hey, it's very rare that a player of this caliber is out there and available. So let's see what we can do. And then they want to go and pursue that player because of how good the player is, not because of any issues with anything going on in terms of, concern at the position or anything like that. So the Saints are in really, really good position here. This is why I think that this can work, because if Justin Simmons and his camp came down on the asking price, we know the New Orleans Saints are very unlikely to move on theirs because they're set there. That's a good thing. Let me tell you why real quick. I think this is the perfect landing spot for Justin Simmons, though. And I mentioned this a little bit in the bonus episode earlier today. So this might be a little bit of a repeat for some folks, but just because I know different people listen different times and don't catch every episode. The reason why I think that this is the perfect landing spot for Justin Simmons is that this system has always made safeties look good. It's always made defensive backs look good. This is an opportunity for him to land somewhere where he gets to show out in 2024 and then go and pursue the big deal that he wants in 2025. You don't want to end up in a place that's going to misuse you, and you don't want to end up in a place that's not going to use you, and you certainly don't want to miss the 2024 season, because then your asking price no longer matters in 2025. You are instead a victim to what people are willing to pay. So this benefits everybody. It benefits Justin Simmons to arrive here in New Orleans in a system that will showcase him and allow him to go out and pursue more money this offseason. And it showcases and it benefits big time the New Orleans Saints to up their defense and provide yet another veteran mentor for their young defensive backs. I think that's really important too. So that's the way that I look at this when it comes to Justin Simmons. This is why it can happen. Now we just need to see if it will. That, of course, will be the next part of the equation. All right, coming up next, I want to dive into the performances today. We saw particularly two wide receivers, Cedrick Wilson and A.T. Perry, have really, really good days, and A.T. Perry's best day of practice. Why is it important? We'll dive into that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. I highly recommend going and downloading the Game Time app today to make sure that you are getting the best deals on tickets, especially if you're somebody like me that likes to plan moments in advance rather than months in advance. And if you're somebody like me that's on the road a lot and you want to take the opportunity to go and see other sports teams, concerts happening outside of your area, all that, Game Time is a great way to do it. In fact, a lot of times tickets actually get cheaper the closer to the beginning of the event when you're on the Game Time app. They also offer zone deals. They offer flash deals. You've got all-in pricing, so you're never surprised by the total at the end. No surprise fees popping up when you finally get to checkout. And you can see the view from your seats before you buy them. It's a very transparent experience, very user-friendly experience, and they simply take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets. So head over and download the Game Time app today and create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints got their best day of practice out of A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry's best day of training camp was today, and now he just needs to build on it moving forward with preseason games on the way, all of that. And of course, the Saints also got a little bit more comfortable, I think, maybe with their wide receiver 3 position, not just because of A.T. Perry's performance, but Cedrick Wilson's as well. We'll break all that down, and I'm going to update you on a big loss for that New Orleans Saints wide receiver room as well here as we continue on with today's episode. We appreciate you very much for being here, and of course, for being here for another episode, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out the new Locked On NFL 24/7 stream. All the biggest stories around the world of sports. If Justin Simmons signs, I promise you I will be all over that 24/7 stream. You can find it on the Locked On NFL YouTube page, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so as we look here, shifting gears from Justin Simmons, whose visit probably just recently started, so it hasn't been a long wait yet. And then heading over now to the practice from today. We saw some really nice stuff in practice today. I mentioned in this morning's episode, I wanted to see more situational work, right? Down and distance, red zone, crowd noise, all of this stuff. We saw all of that today. Down and distance work. They simulated some drives, although they weren't up against the clock in the process, but still simulated some drives, simulated the red zone, kind of got into some of those red zone drills. They had crowd noise there and lots of noise being played on the speakers and stuff like that. An outstanding playlist selection today as well by Fred McAfee, who was an absolute beast on the 1s and 2s today. Started the day off with DMX, X gonna give it to you. It just doesn't get any better than that. And I think that set everything up for AT gonna give it to you, because that's what we saw today. AT Perry was outstanding today. He made several big catches. He and Jake Haener in particular connected a lot today. Big catch down the field, in the middle of the field, attacking the middle of the field, something we saw the New Orleans Saints not do very much last year. We're seeing it more and more and more and more. And then A.T. Perry helping to contribute to that big time. Followed that up with another big catch in red zone drills in the end zone for a touchdown. These are the things you need to see from A.T. Perry, who also looked really, really good in one-on-ones, a couple of those big contested catches that you probably know and love him for if you got the chance to see him over the course of those last 7 games in the regular season last year. This is the momentum that A.T. Perry needed to start building, and he needed to start building it like a week ago. But he's building it now, and that's good. So he put together a couple of nice practices at the end of last week. Monday was a nice practice for him as well, but today was kind of the day to where he really arrived as that other wide receiver. Remember, him, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed are the only 3 returning wide receivers for this team from 2023 into 2024. And you know Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are your top 2 guys, right? Chris Olave, your former first-round pick. Rashid Shaheed, your all-pro and Pro Bowl returner that has also been electrifying for you as a receiver over the course of the past couple of years, whose role continues to grow. But they need the 3rd and 4th options. You need the 3rd option because there is always going to be a lot of those 3 wide receiver sets on the field. So you need somebody that's going to take the field with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. You need the 4th guy too, though, because there's always going to be injuries at the position. And I think A.T. Perry is making a really, really good case to be one of those 2 guys, and really a combination of both of those guys, right? It depends on where you want your wide receiver 3, quote unquote, or your 3rd wide receiver to wrap up, to stand. So do you want that person to be on the outside? That's where A.T. Perry makes a lot of sense. So that's why a big practice like this is huge. It's huge for A.T. Perry. Now all he's got to do is keep the momentum going. And I believe he can do that because once he caught fire last year in the regular season, what did he do? He maintained the momentum all throughout the rest of the year. So now he picked up this. I'm going to get to Mason Tipton here in a little bit, but I picked up with a big practice on today, Wednesday, can follow it up tomorrow on Thursday with another big one. And then he gets into the game situation. And A.T. Perry under the lights, we've already seen what he can do there, but you needed to be able to see it in the practice environment as well, because you've got to be able to show that you can grow, that you can get better, that you can develop, that you can take training, that you can take coaching, you can make adjustments, all those other things. You can't show that in a game. You're busy. You're a little busy in those situations. So you got to be able to show that kind of stuff when it came to practice, and he showed it today. So that was really, really good to see. I thought Cedrick Wilson also had a really, really good day as well. Caught a big pass down the right sideline from Derek Carr, caught another one over the middle, looked good in one-on-ones as well. Really, really good stuff from Cedrick Wilson, who I think is going to be the more common wide receiver 3 on this roster. And what I mean by that is that because he can play in the slot and out wide, while A.T. Perry's a little bit more exclusively out wide, it's just going to maximize Cedrick Wilson's presence on the offense. Now, don't get me wrong, A.T. Perry can also take snaps in the slot. We've seen that over the course of training camp. But Cedrick Wilson has been deemed a slot specialist at an earlier point in his career, particularly when he was with Dallas and performed extremely well there back in 2021. Did a lot of his stuff when it came to the slot. And so seeing a guy like Cedrick Wilson be able to come in and contribute from there, I think is big. And look, you still got other guys too. Like Dennis Allen is not afraid to bring players in. The New Orleans Saints have not been afraid to bring players in. And so like Hunter Renfrow is still on the market. Do you make a phone call to Hunter Renfrow? Like if you finish this up with Justin Simmons, the way that the Saints finish things up with, I mean, if you really look at it, like over the course of the past few years, Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis Landry, I know that didn't completely work out. But Chase Young now, Willie Gay, and then now, if you can land Justin Simmons, like it's a pretty good track record of being able to bring in, Derek Carr, of course, of being able to grab talent in the free agency market and actually get them to come to New Orleans. They've done a pretty good job of that. So if they can do that with a Justin Simmons, and they need more help at wide receiver, maybe Hunter Renfrow does finally get that phone call. We'll see. And one of the things that could add to that is a new injury at the wide receiver position. The team has already been down Equanimeous St. Brown, who we did see, by the way, working off to the side today. So some progress there. Have not seen Bub Means for most of training camp. And then now we just saw, with a hamstring injury, Mason Tipton leave practice today. I believe Mason Tipton can make the roster, but an injury is not going to make it any easier for him. And a hamstring injury in particular on a guy that not relies on speed, but a guy whose one of his trademarks is speed. Hamstring injuries are a bit concerning for that style of player. So definitely something to watch out for. Could be precautionary and all that. Could be a situation to where, you see him maybe back at practice tomorrow and they just took him off the field early. It was during individual drills and stuff like that. So we'll see. But you definitely were hoping to get an opportunity to see Mason Tipton under the lights on that preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals. So fingers crossed he can get out there because he's going to have to be able to kind of prove a bit of that stuff too. Interesting question here. By the way, does Justin Simmons signing speed up the process of AK getting his contract done? Those are going to be two entirely different things. Saints have the cap space to get it done. Don't need to clear space with Alvin Kamara's contract in order to get it done. It's going to be two entirely different things. And if one happens before the other, it's not indicative of anything about the other thing. They have nothing to do with one another because they're entirely separate, since the Saints already have the cap space to sign Justin Simmons as it is. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at Jake Haener, who also had a really, really good day. And I'll update you on a few more interesting news and notes from the day, including why the New Orleans Saints feel like they're truly in a kicker battle. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to, and they want to help you do it faster and for free. That's what I love about LinkedIn Jobs. I remember being somebody that was looking for jobs, looking for work and stuff like that. I used LinkedIn all the time. We used it all the time when I worked in theater too. LinkedIn was really, really popular amongst the theater crowd. So we use that a ton. And I still see it in media too. We post our jobs over on LinkedIn. So if you're a small business, you're looking for a place to get access to a huge network, humongous network of people looking for work, LinkedIn is the place to go. 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other job sites. So if you're not looking at LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And 86% of small businesses that post their jobs on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of that very job posting. So stop messing around. Head over to LinkedIn Jobs to post your job today for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Jake Haener was back with the New Orleans Saints after receiving the procedure on there was a part of the treatment for skin cancer that he was diagnosed with earlier this offseason, and he looked really, really good in his return. It was awesome to see. We appreciate you very much for being here and for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we are your team every day, so I'll be back again in just a little bit, later on tomorrow. We'll have a fresh episode for you as well, where I'm going to update on guys that have made a lot of progress, including defensive end Isaiah Foskey. What wonderful timing. So we're going to dive into all of that in tomorrow's episode. I'm going to give you 3 guys that I feel like have made the most progress so far here throughout training camp in terms of where they were and where they are now, not guys that were already really, really set, right? It's not about top performers. It's about guys who have grown the most. And I think Isaiah Foskey is amongst the top of that list. So listen, Jake Haener had a fantastic day today and really showed up with a lot of confidence. Felt that he was going to come in and have a good day, and he absolutely did. Looked really, really comfortable in the drive simulation, which again was not a timed drive simulation. It was just more about moving the ball down the field, getting into different things. So they would, take a snap from their own 44 and they would call it 1st and 10. Then they would move to the next 45 and they would call it a 2nd and 7. So they were just working on some down and distance kind of scenarios and circumstances and things like that. And he was really, really comfortable in those situations, connected with Kevin Austin on a quick slant on a really nice play, connected with A.T. Perry for a big completion down the right sideline. Then we saw him move into red zone drills where he completed one pass to A.T. Perry on a slant in the end zone, threw a touchdown there. Ended up getting some of those developmental reps too. This is something that Dennis Allen has been doing, not only with the team, not only with the roster, by the way, but with the coaching staff. So what he does is after the team has finished kind of work for the day, he brings everybody together. They all huddle together. They talk, they break it down. Here's how I feel like everything went today. Here's what we're doing tomorrow, all that kind of stuff, right? Then there are guys that are on the quote unquote developmental roster. And then there are guys that are not a part of that. And so the guys that are not a part of that, they move on. They go and they do either some individual work. A lot of guys stick around and get more work in after practice. We see that more and more every single time. But then they run team drills for the quote unquote developmental guys, what they call developmental reps. And so Jake Haener led the first part of those developmental reps. He was with the second team today as he returned to the team, completed a pass to Michael Jacobson, the big 6'6" tight end that skied over Isaiah Stallbird, who had actually left practice at an earlier point, by the way, got rolled up on during a kick return, but then came back. So really, really good to see that for Isaiah Stallbird. But man, Michael Jacobson, who's already just big as all get out, skies up over, makes a big catch, and then comes down on the ground. Really, really nice stuff. We saw Samson Nakua make a really nice play like that at an earlier point too. He has continued to impress as well. And then we saw another completion on a nice screen catch and run over to Marquez Callaway over on the side and all that. And so that looked good as well. And then we actually saw him place a really nice pass for Dallin Holker, who just unfortunately got hit, big time got hit, and then ended up dropping the pass. He was not expecting to get hit until in practice, but he ended up taking a bit of a wrap on that one, but still looked good. Dallin Holker caught a touchdown at an earlier point. That tight end continues to look good as well. So I'm all about where Jake Haener was today. I thought it was probably one of his best days of practice. You could feel the confidence. You can feel how excited he was to be back with the team after missing on Monday. Just looked really good. And so really, really great stuff there from from Jake Haener. No turnovers, nothing like that for the quarterbacks. Just really, really nice. I want to talk about the offensive line real quick too. I thought the offensive line had a nice day today. I don't know if it was just that the defense that they're just getting used to what the defensive line is doing. That's always kind of the risk of evaluating the offensive line late in training camp. Did they just get used to the moves that the defensive line men consistently use, and things like that? So really, like, we're going to learn a lot more about the offensive line depth by watching them up against Arizona this weekend. We're going to learn a lot more about the offensive line starters when they get into the joint practices at the end about this time next week. I think will be huge too. So I think that's going to be the big thing with the offensive line here. And it stinks, if I'm being honest, because it's always like, well, we don't really know about the offensive line until they get in the training camp. And then they get in the training camp and then we're like, well, we're really going to learn about them when they get in the pads. And then it's like, well, we'll really learn about them after they practice multiple times in pads. And then like the goalposts just move all the time because it's so challenging to evaluate that offensive line. But I thought that they looked really good today. Trevor Penning had a really, really nice seal block on a run. It was a run over to the outside. And so when I talk about a seal block, what I mean is that you're creating a hole. So Trevor Penning was running to the right sideline, leading the way for Alvin Kamara. As Alvin Kamara got the corner, Trevor Penning turned his back to Alvin Kamara and put a block down on Kool-Aid McKinstry. I would not want to be Kool-Aid McKinstry in that situation. Small guy on big guy, never great. But he turned his back to Alvin Kamara to make sure, because if his back is turned, the guy's not getting to him, right? The guy that's trying to get through Trevor Penning to Alvin Kamara, you're not getting there. And so a really, really good thing. Ultimately, Anthony Orji came and made a fantastic play, hitting the gap and doing it. But I thought Trevor Penning did all the right things on that play. Taliesin Fuanga looked really good. His hand placement, his hand moves continue to be really good. His strength, his anchor, all that stuff is good too. But I just don't know how much of it is that they're getting used to what they're seeing from the defense. So we'll learn a little bit more when there's some unfamiliarity that is introduced. I imagine that Fuanga as well as Penning will get some preseason snaps. It just makes the most sense for those guys to get those opportunities. So we'll see exactly how that all works. But really, really good stuff there. And look, I think the Saints are in the midst of a kicker competition here. It's hard not to. In fact, Dennis Allen referred to it as a kicker competition in his post-practice presser on Monday. And it was the first time that we really heard him acknowledge it as a competition. Today, we saw Blake Grupe go 5 of 6, including a miss from 37 yards. So that's another one within 40, within 50 that he's missed. And then we saw a pretty good day from Charlie Smith, who put down a couple of good kicks as well, including a 54-yarder. So I think the big thing when it comes to this kicker competition now is really going to be about how do things go in the preseason. They're both going to get opportunities in the preseason. And remember, the kicker competition isn't just about field goal kicks anymore. Can you place the ball correctly and the way that the team wants you to and the way that your special teams coordinators want you to in that new kickoff, right? Because the kickoff is new. You don't want to boot it out of the back of the end zone because then you're giving them the ball in the 30. You don't want to not get it to the 10 or the green zone because then it goes up to the 40. You don't want to kick it out of bounds, but you do want a direction. You do want to put it in a direction so that you can kind of funnel everybody to one side or the other, all that kind of stuff. It's a big part of the competition now. It's a big part of the conversation now is what can you do in those kickoffs and how do you handle yourself in those kickoffs? So again, some fun stuff there. Listen, I got to say this real quick too, as we wrap up. Justin Simmons, Chase Young, Willie Gay. That's the potential for the New Orleans Saints to add to to the defensive side of the football. Then you look over on the offensive side, and there haven't been any like big additions, but a guy like Lucas Patrick, a guy like Cedrick Wilson, adding Clint Kubiak, revamping your offensive coaching staff with guys like Keith Williams and Derek Foster and Andrew Janocko. That's where they address the offensive side. So I got to say, if the Saints were to manage, just like they did with Tyrann Mathieu a few years ago, if they managed to actually land Justin Simmons, I think it's a pretty solid offseason for the New Orleans Saints, despite the fact that it felt pretty quiet. I think that makes the New Orleans Saints offseason at least a little bit more exciting than it was. So I do want to acknowledge that, especially the combination of Chase Young, Willie Gay, and then Justin Simmons. Pretty solid stuff. All right. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Pelicans and Locked On LSU for your second listen. And, of course, we will be here for you with another episode bright and early tomorrow morning. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know the families doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.